Pecha Kucha 310 Worldbuilding Forests. So this is probably the last week of me doing a bit of research onto the places in my manga book. And I believe what I'm going to do next week is actually straight up start conceptualizing the final storyboard that will simply be, produced to be the final draft of the book, the PDF. But before I discuss that, I read SpiderMan Craven's Last Hunt, my copy of this. It's an excellent example of a postmodern comic book where something really impactful happens, but it's something you can't do twice. And I took the picture at the back of the book because the book sells itself as a limited edition 2,000 copy print run, which I have never actually considered adding or detracting from the value of a book. One simply assumes there'd always be a copy available, especially with the internet. Maybe there's something to that, maybe there isn't. But it's effectively, this is the story of Craven, a hunter from Russia going mad and taking it out on Spider-Man. The story is, and then killing himself at the end. The story is told with a level of sophistication and maturity that belies, the subject matter, which would be Spider-Man. Craven is both a man of intense passion and of somber dignity, and the contrast between those two things is very enjoyable to experience through the excellent word work and the very solid art. Craven basically tracks down Peter Parker, appears to shoot and bury him, then takes his place as Spider-Man, killing a couple of people in costume, before in the end Spider-Man comes back from simulated death and puts everything right. In one of there's an inner monologue that Craven, Mary Jane, Vermin, who is a guy I'm not even going to bother explaining who he is, Spider-Man all have, which feeds into what you see versus what the characters are thinking. And then there's some straight up symbology with Spider-Man coming back from the dead and imagining himself kind of surviving the death throes of a spider and being born from its corpse. This book is art. It's as postmodern as you can get for something based in 1960s, stuff aimed at kids. I definitely recommend reading it. It's one of the few examples of a Spider-Man book I'm sure I'll ever come across where it's an investigation of the caliber of the characters in a way that's not necessarily visible to the people in the world. I also saw a movie called Event Horizon, which is one of those science fiction movies. I'm never quite sure if it's the thing I think it is. It's kind of like a science fiction horror thing. Not very good, but not very bad. Shrug. I also saw for a few dollars more of Clint Eastwood and Lee Van Cleef. This is one of those good westerns that makes people want more westerns as opposed to one of those bad westerns, which is why for several decades Hollywood couldn't get away with trying to make westerns because people were sick to death of them. It still stands up. I love it. Rick and Morty Season 6 was being spoiled in my YouTube feed, so I kind of reluctantly decided I'd better go find the first episode before I, see it all chopped up in clips all over the internet. I've always enjoyed Rick and Morty. I still do. I'm looking forward to whatever they're going to do this season. And this week for my bison, I just finished last week's. I didn't really do the lighting or anything. I added some background elements to the background elements I already had, but it was definitely a week where I was feeling not particularly inclined to do anything. There's been a lot of that going on, but still I kind of try to at least do some kind of lip service to the things that I know I should be doing. And speaking of that, a fair amount of my book, the background would be some kind of Japanese forest with a cave by a waterfall and a small lake. So I kind of just grabbed some images, tried to data mine them for things that kind of conflict with what my assumptions of that kind of landscapes would be. And even though the thinking and the actions based on that thinking are pretty, lackluster. It's production questions. How do I go about drawing shrubbery without, losing my mind and tracing stuff? There are options with brushes, there are options with pattern types. There's a lot of things you can do digitally, and it's really me opening up that question of what am I actually going to do, because the fact that this is a one-off book, it's not like I need a long-term production solution for the assets I need to create for this book. If push really comes to shove, I just take it each page at a time and get it done however I can. But I did think it worth looking at, like, what do I see when I Google how forests are drawn in manga, and there's clear examples of people just using digital brushes, copy and paste clone stamp tools, and you can tell because that's what they look like. Is that what I'm going to do? Maybe. At the end of the day, the point is to make this book, and if I have to cheap out on the backgrounds to actually get the story told, none of this book's going to be exceptional, but really the ultimate thing is to get it done. I don't mind a slipping deadline. I don't mind that I'm stalling and still slowly moving in the right direction, because I am still moving in the right direction. But something that did come to my attention this week is this idea that Clip Studio Paint are going to switch to a subscription model for their products and services. Some artists in the YouTube art community are up in arms over this. I think it's been blown out of proportion. It's too early to know what it actually means, but obviously Photoshop charges a subscription model, which is actually quite reasonably priced for the fact that for what you buy, you have access to some of the industry standard multiple industry programs, if that's what you choose to pay for. I don't think Clip Studio Paint's ever going to be that expensive, but it's one of the many things that I've seen in my YouTube feed over the course of this year that I've eroding what little motivation I have to put something out in the world that stands the test of time. But I'm not so callous to think that this by itself is enough to make me throw my hat in or anything like that. So that's the end of Pecha Kucha 310. Like I said earlier, I imagine I'm going to have more to show next week. I'm going to try and get through first issue of my 10-issue book with the finalized storyboard, which should have all the character design, it should have all the dialogue, and it should have all the backgrounds. And then the point is just to kind of effectively trace over that stuff with G-pens and figure out what my color options are. So I'll see you for that.